I want to tell you about another black woman who suffered a horrific ordeal. The injustice and brutality that she faced was a result of her being both black and a woman. This is an important story to tell because it's not just about one black woman who suffered. Her story is a part of a larger story of black women who have suffered under the weight of injustice and oppression. Black women who have been brutalized and mistreated for no other reason than they were black women. This video and the story I'm going to tell you about is a continuation of another video I did about a black child named Mary Booth. Mary was falsely accused and convicted and sentenced to die by hanging at age 13 for a crime that she did not commit. She suffered tremendously. From being almost lynched to being abused in prison, her life was full of pain. And so many of you were really touched and moved by Mary's story. So we decided to cover that topic more here in this video. There was so much more that I wanted to talk about as it relates to the demonization of black women in the Mary Booth video, but I couldn't because it would have been too long. So what I want to do here is delve deeper into this subject and tell you another tragic story of a black woman who suffered. I'm not going to repeat all of the historical context I shared in the Mary Booth video, so I encourage you to watch that video if you haven't already. I provide a really good history on how the narrative that black women are dangerous was shaped and created. But I do want to share with you some additional information that I didn't get into in the last video. So give me a few moments to talk about this, and then I'll get into what happened to the black woman. At least 150 black women were lynched, and thousands more were attacked and violated by white mobs in the American South between the years of 1880 and 1965. The lynching of black women called into question white Southerners' defense of this barbaric mob violence ritual. They maintained that this practice was necessary to protect white women who were being attacked by black men. But the fact that so many black women were lynched for things like arson and poisoning and causing offense to a white person contradicted this idea that lynching was only used on black men to prevent attacks on white women. This was a lie. Lynching had nothing to do with protecting white women. It had to do with brutalizing black people because they were black. We know it was a lie because if the only reason for lynching was to protect white women from black men, then why was a black woman named Emma Fair lynched in 1893? A mob stormed the jail in Alabama and fired at her and 4 black men as they were in the cell who were accused of burning a white man's cotton gin. If lynching was only about protecting white women from black men, then Mahala Jackson and Lou Carter would not have been lynched in 1893 in Quincy, Mississippi for being complicit in poisoning a white family, even though a coroner's jury found them innocent. A black woman named Julia Metz would not have been lynched in 1891 for allegedly setting fire to the barn of her employer, J.S. Blaylock. After being arrested, Julia was taken from the constable and hanged from a tree. I could keep going on and on and on with stories of countless black women who were attacked and beaten and lynched well into the 20th century, and every time, the brutality against them was justified. White newspapers would often defend lynchings of black women. They would describe black women as being vicious and dangerous or monstrous. Public opinion had to be swayed in favor of lynching when it came to women. So the white press made sure that black women were portrayed in the worst possible light to justify the mob's actions against them. It was easy to justify the lynching of a black man. The accusations of violating white women received no pushback when it came to lynching black men. But that wasn't the case for black women. There was no comparable crime that would justify the lynching of a black woman. So the monstrous and dangerous black woman had to be created. The lynchings of black women exposed the real reason behind Southern lynching, and that was to ensure that the caste system that kept black people on the bottom rail of society was maintained at all costs. This idea of black women poisoning white families went back to slavery. Enslaved black people not only worked in the fields, but also in the slave owners' homes. And slave owning whites maintained a fear about being poisoned by the enslaved black people that they were keeping in bondage and brutalizing. In 1751, South Carolina passed a law that made it illegal for a black person to teach another black person anything about any poisonous plant, herb, root, or poison. It made this crime punishable by death. In Charleston, an enslaved black woman was burned alive after a white infant came up sick and they accused her of poisoning that child. In 1886, a black woman named Eliza Woods was accused of poisoning a white woman she worked for as a cook named Mary Wooten. It was claimed that Mary Wooten had arsenic in her stomach, and when Eliza's house was searched, a rat poison called rough on rats was found in it. That was all the evidence that was needed to accuse, arrest, and lynch Eliza. A mob of 1,000 men formed and dragged Eliza from the jail, stripped her naked, and hanged her from a tree in front of the courthouse. After she was hanged, the mob fired at her body. Papers referred to Eliza as a black female devil who deserved what she got. This was the environment that black women were living in. They were under full assault at all times from all directions. And this was the environment that Jennie Steers found herself in when she became another black woman to suffer at the hands of those who did not see her as human and were quick to accuse, convict, and execute her without taking a breath or blinking an eye. Jennie Steers was born Jennie Clayton in August of 1877 in northwest Louisiana. Both her mother and her father were from Louisiana. We don't know their names because we weren't able to locate any census records before the year 1900 that will help us to detail Jennie's family history. Jennie never attended school and could not read or write. In September of 1898, she married a man named Alex Steers. Together, they had 2 children, a son named Walter, who was born 1 year before they married in 1897, and a son named Robert, who was born in 1900. Something happened between 1898 when Jennie and Alex married because the 1900 U.S. Census, which was taken in early June, states that Jennie was a widow raising her 2 sons by herself. Around this time, Jennie worked as a farmer and a sharecropper and lived on or near a plantation called Cross Keys Plantation. This was about 30 miles down the river from Shreveport. Sometime in the summer of 1900, Jennie moved to Shreveport. She worked as a domestic worker in the home of a white woman named Alice Matthews. The Matthews family lived in the downtown Shreveport area and ran a boarding house that sometimes had as many as 35 people staying there at a single time. Before I get into what happened to Jennie Steers, it's important for me to give you one more piece to this horrific story. It can be argued that this incident was one of the reasons whites in Shreveport were so quick to condemn Jennie Steers. In April of 1903, tragedy struck the Matthews home. On Saturday, April 12, 1903, someone broke into the home of Alice Matthews in the early morning hours and brutally attacked Alice and her 10-year-old daughter, Eileen. Alice was attacked with an axe and died from her injuries. Eileen was also seriously injured, but she ended up surviving. It wasn't until 6 a.m. when a black woman named Mary Wells, who worked as a cook, and Jennie Steers, who worked as a housemaid, arrived to begin their day at work when the gruesome crime scene was discovered. When Mary and Jennie reached the kitchen, they saw a bloody footprint on the floor. This led to the bedroom where the 2 women discovered Alice Matthews, who had been horrifically attacked and left for dead. The scene was so bloody and so gruesome that Jennie screamed out in fear and woke everyone in the home. Alice was attacked with an axe as she slept in her bed. When 10-year-old Eileen heard her mother being attacked, she came to see what was going on. The intruder then struck her twice over the head with the axe. Eileen was discovered next to her mother's body. She played dead during the attack. She barely survived what happened. This crime shocked all of Shreveport. Everyone wanted to know how this happened, who did it, and when they would be captured. There was no clear motive because all of Alice Matthews' valuable jewelry was left on her person and in her room. Her diamond rings were still on her fingers when her body was discovered. The police began investigating immediately. A coroner's jury was also called to investigate this incident. Shortly after the discovery of Alice Matthews' body, police received a note at the Shreveport Police Headquarters saying that a black man was seen with bloodstains on his shirt. Police immediately put together a search party and went looking for this unknown black man in the area where the note said that he was. After searching, police spotted a 35-year-old black man named Albert Washington coming out of the woods, walking towards the road. Albert had no connection with Alice Matthews or her boarding house. The police said that Albert had blood on his shirt, and when they asked him to stop, he ran. The police fired at Albert as he ran away and took his life. His body was then stolen from the undertaker and burned on the street in downtown Shreveport for all to see. Everyone thought that the case was solved. Albert's story is very sad. Albert worked in Bossier Parish as a laborer on a plantation. The 2 white men he worked for said that Albert had worked for them all day, and afterwards, he and other black men took the train to Shreveport. Once in Shreveport, Albert went to the hospital to see his wife, who was sick. When he arrived at the hospital, he was told that she had been moved to DeSoto Parish. Albert made his way to the train, and it was during this walk to the train that he was stopped by the police and they took his life. A grand jury was later convened to investigate the death of Alice Matthews. Judge Alfred D. Land presided over the grand jury, and he told the grand jury members that the police had the lawful right to take the life of Albert Washington to prevent his escape. But after investigating, the grand jury still had no idea as to the motive for the crime. But there was one more thing that was discovered that officials were starting to realize, and that was that Albert Washington had nothing to do with Alice Matthews' death. All of this set the stage for what was going to happen to Jennie Steers. With her employer dead, Jennie went back working on the Cross Keys plantation. The plantation was now owned by John Dolan. He was a very prominent citizen in Shreveport, and he was also someone who was no friend to black people. He once bragged about how he was glad that white rule had been restored to the South after Reconstruction ended. The Dolans had a daughter named Elizabeth. She was around 16 years old in 1903. On July 25th of that year, Elizabeth became ill and she died after consuming a cup of lemonade that had been poisoned with strychnine. It's a toxic, odorless, and colorless pesticide that can be fatal if ingested. When Elizabeth died, papers all across the state carried the story. She was the daughter of one of the state's most powerful and prominent white men. Without any real reason, suspicion quickly turned to Jennie being the one who gave Elizabeth the poisoned lemonade. And just like that, plans began to be made to find Jennie and lynch her. Jennie must have sensed that she was in danger because she fled the plantation. I can only imagine how fearful Jennie must have been. Here was this 26-year-old widowed mother of 2 boys. And this was a time when segregation and racial discrimination was seen as normal. No one protected black people. Jennie had already seen what happened to Albert Washington just 3 months before, and we can safely assume that she was aware of other black people who had been brutalized and lynched. She likely was consumed with fear for herself, but also for her 2 boys. A mob of white men searched the area looking for Jennie. After searching all over, they found her hiding in a hayloft near Bayou Lachute. When the men found Jennie, they questioned her about the Dolan girl's death. Jennie denied having anything to do with the girl's death, but the mob did not care. She was dragged out, and Jennie was taken back to Cross Keys Plantation. This must have been terrifying for Jennie because this was not a situation that black people typically made it out alive from. Once back at the plantation, the Dolan family identified Jennie as the one who poisoned their daughter. The mob then took Jennie to a nearby tree. They tied a rope around her neck. They tied her hands and her feet. The mob then asked Jennie to confess to the crime. Jennie again said that she did not poison the girl. Mob members pulled the rope and hung 26-year-old Jennie Steers from the tree until she was dead. As her body dangled, members of the mob fired at Jennie. After Jennie was lynched, the press and public continued to go after her. Papers expressed regret for her death, not because they believed that Jennie was innocent, but because they wanted Jennie to tell them what happened to Alice Matthews. People began saying that Jennie was the one who attacked Alice Matthews and her daughter Aline. Jennie was now portrayed as a diabolical black woman who attacked respected white women. One paper actually said this. It said that Jennie was one of the most diabolical female criminals that the country had ever known. Initially, the press and the police advanced the theory that a man attacked Alice Matthews and her daughter for the purpose of violating them. But after Jennie Steers was lynched, the press did a 180 and presented a new theory that was designed to blame Jennie Steers. By late July, after Jennie's lynching, the press said that it was robbery and not outrage and violation that was the motive for the Matthews crime, and that a woman was the culprit because the wounds on Alice Matthews' body were too shallow to have been inflicted by a man. After initially claiming that nothing had been stolen, the papers reported that money was missing. The story was altered to make it seem like Jennie Steers was the brutal attacker to justify her lynching. The press also said that Jennie had previously tried to take Elizabeth's life on 2 prior occasions. They said the first time, Jennie put strychnine in Elizabeth's lemonade, but that she refused to drink it because she sensed that something was in it. On the second alleged attempt, they said that Jennie had tried to lure Elizabeth into a rowboat to drown her, but Elizabeth was afraid of water and refused to get in. Another paper said that Jennie was jealous of Elizabeth because Elizabeth was engaged to a white man that Jennie had been intimate with. The rumors about Jennie were outlandish. The paper said that she was violent and that she had gambled outside the church with black men. One paper said that Jennie was so violent and so strong that once she fought another black woman in the field and it was difficult to pull Jennie off of the other black woman. All of this hysteria about the violent, villainous black woman who was driven by sexual passions was designed to create fear of Jennie and justify the lynching of her. They wanted to make sure that no one felt sorry for Jennie Steers or any other black woman. I should also tell you that after Jennie was lynched and blamed for the Matthews crime, just 1 month later, a similar attack took place. In August of 1903, a white couple in Shreveport, Robert and May Smith, were brutally attacked in their beds as they slept. The intruder used an axe. May died from her injuries. It was at this time that the press changed their story once again. They found similarities in this crime to that of Alice and Aline Matthews, and also with that of 2 other women, Josephine LaCow and Marie Wheeler, 2 women attacked in the same way before the Matthews crime. Now the press and the authorities were sure that it was a single man who was responsible for all the crimes, a reversal from when they had said that a woman, mainly Jennie Steers, was responsible for all of this. The police claimed that a man named Jim Reed confessed to the crime and was responsible for attacking Robert and May Smith with an axe. The police said that Jim was having a relationship with May, but in 1904, a jury was unable to reach a verdict in Jim's case. An interesting twist that we found was that Jim Reed was represented by A.D. Land Jr., The son of the judge has said that it was lawful to take Albert Washington's life, and the prosecutor was Judge Land's brother, John Land. At Jim Reed's second trial, the prosecution dropped all charges against him and said that they had no evidence that he had committed the attack. After it was all said and done, 3 black people had been blamed for Alice Matthews' death. 2 had lost their lives as a result of it: Albert Washington and Jennie Steers. Neither had anything to do with this crime. The mob, whites in Shreveport, and the press were quick to justify Jennie Steers' lynching because they claimed that she was responsible for 2 white women's deaths. We don't know if Jennie poisoned Elizabeth Dolan. There is strong evidence to suggest that she did not. But what we do know is that her being a black woman during a time when black women were demonized and made out to be monsters gave all the cover that was needed for the mob to lynch her and never ask a single question. At the time of Jennie's death, her son Walter was 5 and her other son was 3. We don't know what happened to them, but what we do know is that in the span of 3 years, they lost both their mother and their father, and they too lived the rest of their lives likely under Jim Crow rule in the South. They lived and died lives filled with injustice, filled with pain, and filled with horrific memory. Being black has always been associated with criminality. Stories were created and exaggerated to justify brutality against black people and black women in particular. If you were black, there was no need to conduct an investigation or ask any questions. Being black convicted you and executed you. I want to know your thoughts on the story. Had you ever heard of Jennie Steers, and how did it make you feel learning all that she went through? Leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts.